I just recorded this whole super long video and my mic was off. And so here we go again. I'm a little pissed off, but okay, here we go. So I remember being a kid and I grew up to immigrant parents. And because I grew up to immigrant parents, it was very difficult to convince my parents to let me hang out with any of the kids who weren't part of our ethnicity group. Call it racism. It was just they were uncomfortable because they had very traditional values and they were worried that some of my friends might have a bad influence on me. So they'd always ask me questions like, what does Eric's mom do for a living? If you're going to go visit Alex, are his parents divorced? Does Anthony do drugs? I'd be getting asked these sorts of questions. And eventually, my parents did get to know some of the parents of the kids I went to school with. They got to know Anthony's parents and Alex's parents and Eric's parents and all these guys. And so eventually they kind of loosened up and let me go and visit my friends. And I remember being 12 years old and I'd go to Eric's house and it was the end of the school year. This was back in 2006. And I remember we'd be outside playing with water guns and we'd be playing with water balloons and we'd be having a great time. Now, I remember coming inside for some flaming hot Cheetos and I passed by Eric's mom and she was on her PC and she was playing this mystical game called World of Warcraft. And I grew up during the golden era of MMOs, so I was already used to MapleStory. I was used to old school RuneScape. But Tedrasil, the music, the ears, the graphics, even the fact that you can rotate your character at the character selection screen was amazing to me. And I instantly fell in love with the game. And lucky for me, my birthday was coming up. So I remember asking my dad, yeah, World of Warcraft, that's exactly what I want for my birthday. And I remember going to GameStop and buying the box and also 2 months of game time. And since the game came with 1 month of game time for free, that was 3 months. Now, lucky for me, the summer was coming up because my birthday is at the end of May. And so I had the whole summer, and it was one of the most memorable summers of my entire life. Till this day, I remember that I would wait until my dad went to work in the morning for me to sprint downstairs where our computer was so I could play the game. And right before my dad came back from work, I would run back upstairs because I knew if he saw me playing it 9, 10 hours a day that it would cause me problems. So I'd make sure to wait till he got to work to get on, and I'd make sure to get off right before he came home. And I remember too, on Sundays after church, I'd come home and I'd sit down and I'd play Gnome again and I'd do that dungeon. And I'd remember the dial up, my parents would be getting a phone call. And so out of DC, and it'd be so frustrating. And looking back, it's just such fond memories. And I have such fond memories with the game until this day. I will get emotional listening to Elwyn Forest music. And then ultimately, what ended up happening was high school started. And so I got busy with all of that and girls. And you know what happens in high school. And so I kind of stopped playing as much, but I would still dip my toe in. I came back, dipped my toe in for Wrath. I came back, dipped my toe in for, I think it was Mists. And I was on and off. But I didn't really play any other video games during that time. And so I had this goodwill for World of Warcraft built up, and I remembered it fondly. And it was really one of the last games I had played in my childhood before I started entering adulthood and entering into teenagerhood. And so then, of course, I became an adult and life kind of became more predictable. And it's like, okay, well, I have some time now to go play some games again. And I remember this was during the time Battle for Azeroth was coming out. And I watched that cinematic where, Anduin raises up all of the Alliance soldiers and he goes, for the Alliance. And Sylvanas does her Banshee scream and she's like, for the Horde. And it was just so cool. And it was a great entry point back into the game for me. I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. And so then I remember getting the game and getting some game time, and I had a little bit of fun for a couple months. I'm like, oh, this isn't really that fun anymore, and I dropped it. But I still kept in touch with all of the content creators. I'd still watch Asmongold. I'd still watch Talius and Inevital. I'd still watch Bellular. I'd watch all of these guys. And I kind of fell in love with that community and, that content cycle. And even though I wasn't playing the game anymore, I kind of stuck with these guys. And I had such a fondness for the game. And I'd even then dip my toe back in and out. When Classic came out, you best bet I came in to play Classic. And I had fun for a little while. And then, with all of the min-maxing and all of the sweatiness and all of the toxicity. And let's be honest, the game is now very old. It's over 15 years old. So it's not necessarily up to date. And all of these things, I eventually stopped playing Classic, but I'd still look at the game fondly and I'd still keep up with it. And sooner or later, the game started becoming, more toxic, and the way that content creators would be talking about it was in a more negative light. Now, I understand that a lot of content creators make negative content. And I'm not saying any of the ones I mentioned do this, but it does help with views, at least in the short term, because people are attracted to negativity. The media does the same thing, the news does the same thing. And so it was annoying. And I tried over and over again at that point. I'd sub for a month, unsub, sub for 2 months, unsub. And then I noticed all of these ways that the game, really did just end up becoming a shell of its former self. I noticed the ways that Blizzard was monetizing and the way they try to rope you into 6 month subs by incentivizing you with a cosmetic mount. I noticed the ways you could buy gold through buying the WoW token legally. And when you did that, what ended up happening was it allowed you to make the whole game pay to win by being able to buy boosts, by being able to buy whatever gear you wanted. And when classic Burning Crusade, when it was announced for that game, that boosts would be allowed in that game as well, it kind of broke my heart, and I felt like the integrity of the game really was dwindling. And so the way I kind of think about it is like a bank account. When I was a 12-year-old, my bank balance for World of Warcraft, the currency that they've built up with me, the rapport, the goodwill, it was just stacked high. And then ever since Battle for Azeroth came out, because I had a gap in between, and so ever since BFA came out, a little bit at a time, my goodwill was dwindling. The game was boring, and then I felt like they were trying to monetize me unfairly, and then they were just trying to see me as a customer, and they didn't really care about the quality of the product anymore. And little bit by little bit by little bit, and it just wasn't the game that I started playing. For example, I remember doing the Shadowlands campaign, and it was so on rails, and it was so devoid of allowing me to have my own competence and explore and make mistakes, unlike it was in classic and in vanilla. Because I remember in vanilla, you go up to Hogger and you try by yourself and you're level 7, you're dead. You walk into Ghostlands or you walk into Red Ridge, and you're too low level, you're getting clapped, even though that's right next to the starting zone. That's right next to Elwyn Forest. And that sense of exploration and figuring out my limits for myself was something I really liked about the game when it first came out. And Shadowlands were just so far away from that experience, and the narrative wasn't necessarily compelling, and I didn't feel like I was the target audience for that game anymore. And because of my nostalgia, because of my love for the music, because of my love for even the world, the fantasy of it, I'm huge into Tolkien. I think Lord of the Rings is the greatest story of our time, or of the last 200 years, maybe even the last 500 years. And so this is a game that was near and dear to me. And over time, I got angrier and angrier, and I got so upset, and I'd be like, Blizzard, Blizzard, how could they do this? And I would have hope that the game would one day return its former glory, because I remembered what it was like playing it as a 12-year-old, and I just wished that I could come back to that experience. And I would wait, and I'd get so excited for each patch 8.2, patch 8.3, patch 9.0, patch 9.1, until eventually it was just like I stopped getting mad, and what ended up happening instead was now I feel apathetic, just absolutely apathetic about the situation. It's like, World of Warcraft sucks. Yeah, what's new? And it's so sad that that's where we're at right now. My joy and enthusiasm and passion for the game turned into anger for it not being there anymore, which then ultimately turned into me just not giving a shit. Like, I just don't care anymore. And then you have things like boosting and the boosting community making me feel like the game has lost its integrity. Back in vanilla, if you were level 60, you probably earned that fair and square. There was really no botting. There was no carrying, really. There was no... And, like, there were some internet sources like ThoughtBot, but fundamentally, there just wasn't that much stuff you could Google. Games weren't about metagaming just yet, and it was just a much different time back then. And for that reason, I'm finding that I'm enjoying Elden Ring, which came out recently at the time of the recording of this video, because I'm making it an intent of mine to not look things up beforehand and to not look up metas. And because it's a single player game, I feel like I could get away with doing that. No one's really dependent on me, and I'm not going to get clapped in PvP by meta tryhard sweaties. Because, well, I mean, technically I can get invaded, but it's not really a core component of the game. And I've been rambling on for almost 10 minutes now. That's about all I had to say for this. I miss the game, but at this point, I don't think we're ever going to be getting our World of Warcraft back. At the back of my mind, do I still have a little bit of copium left? Yeah, I do. I do have a little bit of copium left, but at this point, I'm mostly just apathetic. And that's it. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.